Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started here. Starting out with just some initial welcome messaging to all the participants in this breakout room, as well as Colonel Preston. Appreciate all of your participation throughout the conference over the last several days here, and we're at the home stretch of the event at this point. So appreciate everyone hanging tight here as we're wrapping up the portion of the conference here on day 2 of the conference. I would just mention real briefly that we will have the opportunity, if time allows, for some Q&A at the end of the session. So if there are any questions that anyone would have for the Colonel over the course of the presentation, feel free to type those in chat, and I'll help to moderate those questions with the Colonel at the end of the session here during the Q&A portion. So with all that said, I'd like to go ahead and welcome Colonel Scott Preston. The Colonel is the Commander and District Engineer of the Tulsa District, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and is the Senior Military Officer and Engineer at the Tulsa District. Colonel Preston oversees more than 700 engineers and professionals from various functional backgrounds. Colonel Preston is responsible for civil works, military programs, and the operations of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers projects and activities for all of Oklahoma, southern Kansas, and North Texas. Preston hails originally from Liberty, Missouri, and was commissioned in the U.S. Army as an engineer officer following graduation from the University of Missouri-Rolla, or what is now known as Missouri University of Science and Technology, in 1997. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Colonel Preston. Appreciate your time today, and we'll let you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Still coming through clear? Okay, good. Hey, so that was a quick bio there. So yeah, I am from Missouri, so don't hold that against me. But I do have relatives. My father's side, my father's mother's side came from Kansas. They settled there late 1800s and ended up coming over to Missouri. So I do have some ties there. So first off, just want to give you a few. Go ahead, next slide, Loretta. So I want to give you a few overviews from the past year. So we did our park visitations have been pretty good over the last 2 years. So in 2020, when COVID hit, parks opened late, so our numbers dropped a little bit. They dropped down to about 1.5 million visitors in Kansas, but that was with a late park opening. And in 2019, they were up to 1.7. But then in 2021, since we opened up full time, we opened up all the places we could. There were still some parks that were closed due to flooding from the previous year. We got up to 1.85 million. So recreation is big in Tulsa District and of course at our lakes. Next area there is our flood risk management. So 2021 was a big year for the flood. We are still working to repair all the areas. We did some initial work in some of the smaller cities, some erosion repair, and that's for the most part, it's all been corrected. And we got some of the big projects within the federal lands that we're still working right now. So you can see right there, we got $11.23 million for Kansas, and we've obligated about $9 million of that. So we're almost close. So we'll be here by 1 January. We should have all the awards for all the projects awarded, and then construction will start here in the spring. Harmful algae bloom is still a big concern for us. Marion Lake is our biggest concern, but right now we don't have lakes that are shut down because of it. But we do have some subject matter experts in the district, and we continually do research on what we can do. We've had some great relationships with our own internal Corps of Engineers, Engineer Research and Development Center, as well as NOAA's helped out, and the Kansas Department of Health and Environment have helped out too. So looking at some peroxide treatments and doing research on that to see if that's going to help with the situation. But we understand it's a concern there in Kansas, and we're doing everything we can to help prevent in the future. There's a few parks there that do have some closure still at Council Grove, Fall River, Marion. And in, not quite in Kansas, but in Oklahoma is the MCARNs. That's our navigation system that has the Port of Catoosa there in Tulsa, Oklahoma, down to Muskogee, and then all the way down through Arkansas to the Mississippi River. And it's a big boom for the economics of Kansas. The agricultural industry really uses the MCARN. So 2020, or 2019, the flood stopped it for a little while. About 4 months, we lost flow on that navigation channel. We got it fixed late fall of 2019, and now it's not quite back to where we were as far as the economic piece, but it's coming back quickly. And the ports are looking to expand to bring in more customers here in the future. So and we hit the 50th anniversary of that system this year. So great for the whole region. And last, for the budget for our normal operation maintenance, This year, we're seeing $13.6 million, which is up from 11.2 the year before. Correction, I get my numbers off a little bit. It's a couple $1 million higher than the previous year. So yeah, $11.24 million in 2021. We're seeing 13.64 for 2022. So Congress is seeing the need for operation and maintenance of these flood control reservoirs here in Kansas. Okay, next slide. Next thing I want to go into real quick is, so our division, which includes most of Kansas, or correction, most of Texas, missing a little bit there over by the Panhandle, all of Oklahoma, a little bit of Arkansas, a little bit of Missouri, and of course Kansas, parts of Kansas. We looked at a what we call our Civil Works strategic plan. So we wanted to find out, where our struggles are, where our strengths are, and what we can do to move forward in the future. So just a few highlights from our strengths is, first off, we want to look at what we can do in the future to maintain a safe, sustainable, resilient water resources for the region. So we looked at our strengths. So first piece is our stakeholder relationships, doing things like this, working with the Kansas Water Office, Park and Recs, different places, Department of Agriculture. We feel we have pretty good relationships with not only the local entities, politicians, but at the congressional level and the federal level, state level. I think we do a pretty good job. And even with the contractors, getting them out there on projects and working with them to get things correct. I think we do a pretty good job of that. Next one is we have a firm foundation in engineering. We do definitely have an embrace of innovation. Our chief engineer is really looking at research and development and what we can do in the future. Our flood risk management program protects about $20 billion in assets across the whole region. And we saw that in 2019. Yes, we had flooding, but it would have been a lot worse if the structures hadn't been there. Hydropower is another big asset to the region. Now in Kansas, we don't have any hydropower, but in Arkansas, Oklahoma, and even in parts of Texas, it's pretty big. And then this year actually in 2020, when we had 2021, when the freezes back in February, and it locked a lot of local economies off the grid, our powerhouses were still able to operate and actually produce a little bit extra power to help stabilize the grid, especially in Oklahoma and a little bit in Texas. And they are green energy too, so it's always good to have that aspect. Water supply is huge for the region. 75% of all the Corps of Engineers water supply contracts are in this region, Southwest Division. And about 60% are in Oklahoma or Tulsa district, and in Kansas, about 40% of the total water supply contracts across the nation are in Kansas for the Corps of Engineers. So that's a big plus for what we're doing. Recreation is huge in our region. We're either number one, number two in different types of recreation, whether it's campgrounds, boat ramps, water safety contacts, lots of areas. Number one for the region, and the Tulsa district in Kansas, number 1 or 2, 3 in different areas. And the protecting our natural resources, we take great pride in that. Over the last year, we've had a couple of great successes. One is the least interior tern, which is a bird that migrates in our area and operates in our rivers, lives in our rivers. And we've actually, because of the work we've done with that program, we brought it down from endangered down to threatened. And the same with the American burying beetle. That was on the endangered species list, and it's been moved down to threatened by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. So a lot of great work there. Next slide. So next part, we couldn't just rest on our strengths. We got to look at what our weaknesses are. So here's 6 of them we looked at, and I'll just cover a few highlights here. One is population growth. So we're seeing that across the region, especially the pandemic. People are moving to our regions, which is a good thing, but it also takes a lot of wear and tear on our facilities. I just talked about the parks we have, the recreation. Our recreation numbers have gone up, and we see that continuing to go up, and that's more wear and tear out there on our structures. Extreme weather, whether it's floods we had in 2015, floods in 2019, or even just hurricanes and tropical storms that are in the region, they continually do damage to not only the population or citizens, but to our structures too. And then the harmful algae blooms that I mentioned, that is a big concern in our region as well. Next area is uncertain future for energy. We've got the hydropower, which is great, but it has problems too. There are competing demands with water supply, recreation, hydropower, all pull on what that hydropower provides. It is green, but it does challenges to the environment out there. There are fish that can't migrate, and different mussels that are affected by the water. It doesn't run anymore. So we understand that where does hydropower play into the national grid in all types of energy. Increasing demand on our water resources. So obviously in Kansas, water supply is big. All of our lakes right now, the water supply contracts are full. We can't bring any more in. But what is that in the future? Do we need to look at more reservoirs to get more water supply? We do have hydropower in Oklahoma, in Arkansas, and Kansas, or Texas. Do we need to pull those competing demands? Does it need to go towards water supply or flood risk management or other areas? So that's something we always got to look at. And then aging infrastructure. We've had lots of, we just talked about the MCARNs hitting its 50th anniversary, but in Kansas, of our 8 projects, some of them go all the way back to 72 years old, which is Fall River, to our newest Big Hill, which is only 39 years old. So that's a vast difference of ages of infrastructure. Most of them were constructed in the 1960s. So they are getting up there in age in the 50-year mark, 50, 60-year mark. So those, obviously, when that happens, it takes a lot more money to help maintain those. Okay, next slide. And that brings us to the some goals that we're looking at. So 4 goals I want to cover real quick. One is enable innovative solutions to our complex challenges. So we're looking at our projects and seeing what are the multi-benefits that we can have, the multi-uses we can get out of these projects. And when we do a new project, whether it's a reservoir or a levee, what have you, we're not looking at just the cost-benefit ratio to determine if it needs to go in. We're also looking at health or safety and security of our population. So it may not be economically relevant to put a structure in, but because the lives it'll save, it makes more sense. And we're doing that in Tulsa, West Tulsa, the levee system, and right outside the western side of Tulsa right now. The next one is a shift towards a more proactive and responsive mode. What we're looking here is updating our technologies. Like I said, most of these projects are in the 50-year mark. We're going back in and seeing, are there areas we can use telemetry to see what's going on instead of having to put people out there? Whether it's the gates, can we do some work to make those more electronic, to monitor them easier? We're also investing more in pre-disaster planning resilience, whether that's mapping different areas and sharing that with the population, local municipalities, and sharing the information so it's out there in the public. Next one is a revision our role as a collaborative partner. We're all about partnership, and I've got our slide here to talk partnership. But we want to support our stake and local leaders. We want to make sure we take an active role and maybe in a leadership role within federal agencies. During FEMA, we worked with FEMA during the alternate care facility mission when COVID was rampant back in 2020, and we took the lead in our state, especially in Oklahoma, on setting up facilities to bring in COVID patients to help out the hospitals in the area, and also just raising awareness through events like this. So whether it's briefing presentations like this, I've done a couple others with the Red River Valley Association and others. We want to get our message out there and see where we can help. And the last one there, adaptively manage full life cycle water resource infrastructure. We want to see where we can do some public-private partnerships. This is really big in our recreation industry, whether it's marinas, campgrounds. So instead of the federal government managing those, can we find a private entity that can help manage those to provide more resources to our citizens? We're also looking at our division level, at the region level, do we manage our projects better? So for example, the MCARNs, it splits between Oklahoma, Tulsa District, and Arkansas, Little Rock District. And so instead of having 2 competing districts, we're looking more at the district, the enterprise level, at the division to say, hey, where are the priorities? Where can we help out and maintain the flow of the entire channel? So we're doing that with our navigation and our hydropower too, trying to regionalize those so we're more consistent. And then we're ensuring the new projects are designed for our long-term operations and that the maintenance on them doesn't get out of hand in the long term. So each slide and check out the full briefing on this, and I encourage you to do so. Next slide. This is brand new. So we just had our governance conference at our enterprise level, which is headquarters, USAID's Corps of Engineers, and Lieutenant General Spellman, he's our Chief of Engineers, and this is his new vision for partnering. I just want to quote right there, he wrote, committed to working together with our partners to accomplish the mission and build enduring relationships through trust, transparency, and shared values. And we're all about that. I think in Tulsa District, we do a really good job of that. For example, back in August, we met with the Governor Kelly. I brought in my division commander, General Beck. We met with her, met with several members of our Department of Agriculture there in Kansas, met with the director of the Kansas Water Office, Connie Owens, she was there. We met with the State Parks Director, Linda Latterman. So we have those relationships, and they're all on the ground every day. We've got our operations program manager, Gene Goff, and I think Gene is on today. I know Gary Kepley's on. These are our boots on the ground every day and are doing those relationships, keeping those contacts every day and seeing where we can help and being better partners. We also work very closely with Kansas City District, which has obviously the upper half of Kansas, to make sure what they're doing is in sync with what we're doing. We don't want to have recreation issues where they're doing something we're not, so we're trying to make sure it's all synced together. Next slide. And this just shows the steps that we're at. And I talked about several of these already. So 1 through 4 we've done for our strategic plan, and now we're into really 5 and 6. And this is what we're doing. We're doing things like this to show what we're doing on the federal level, and to find out, where do you see issues? Where do you see the strengths and weaknesses in Kansas, and where can we help out? So the next slide, Loretta. This talks about some of the authorities that we have. And you may have heard of these, you may not, and we're prepared. Afterwards, we can talk more on these. And if you got any more questions, I've got email contacts. But this is what we can do at the federal level to help out state and local economies. Overall, there's about 9 legislative authorities that stakeholders can use. Most of these come out of various congressional legislation, Flood Control Acts, Water Resource Development Acts, and the River Harbor Acts that come out every couple of years. So the big one there is Continuing Authorities Program. And on this one, the good thing about this one is it's got some dollars behind it. Anywhere from $5 to $10 million per project, depending on what it is. There's different sections of the laws where we can look at. So emergency stream bank and shoreline protection for facilities is the main one. That's the one that really we can use here in Kansas, and we've used it a few times. Right now, we've got three of these projects from Montgomery County, in Coffeyville, Independence, and Liberty. We've got the projects and what they are. We're just waiting for funding from our headquarters to execute those. The feasibility study of these is the first $100,000 is all federal, and then after that it's 50% split, and then that $5 to $10 million range is a 65% federal split, 35% to the local. So great asset that we can help out where we can. Next one is planning assistance to states and tribes. This one is a little different. This one is a 50-50 cost share. And if the tribe is involved, in the tribe, the first $510,000 is all federal, which is great. And I know here, especially in Oklahoma and Kansas, there are tribes that can use this thing. And what we're doing here is we're looking at comprehensive water resource planning. We're looking at technical support or assistance that we can give to a local economy or non-federal sponsor to help out in any kind of water resource. Next one there is a request to alter a federal project. So what we're talking here is if you anywhere on the federal land, at one of our reservoirs, there's something that is going to benefit the local economy, local stakeholder, we can work with you on that. We did this at John Redmond for the dredging operations up there. Non-federal sponsor came in, so we need a dredge to get our water supply storage back in where it should be, and we worked with where we can store that dredge material on federal land. When we do water supplies, there's other places we can do the same thing there too. Next couple, I'll real briefly these. One is the flood risk management program. This one we're looking at different areas in the floodplains. This is all federal, but we can help out, look at an area and see where flooding occurs and what we can do at the federal level to prevent that. Like I said, once again, this is all federal costs. And the Silver Jackets program, this is all federal again. And this is where we're looking at studies and assessments to build resiliency in a non-federal sponsors area. And we can bring to bear engineers and emergency management professionals to help out there. The next slide. Let's finish up quickly. So our lakes. So here we have 8 lakes, plus we've got one more that's a section 7. That's Chaney Reservoir, and this is one when it gets into flood level, we control it when the release of that water. So 2021 was a good year. None of the lakes were in